Hi, I'm Steve Green. This is part two to follow on from the earlier part for the sort of more advanced plugin to calculate values within an entity. In this second part, we're going to be looking at from the account on the update, retrieving the, as you can see on screen from Sanjeeb, sorry, question on one of the Microsoft forums. He wants to retrieve any associated cases and take a custom field's values, total them all up, and subtract them from the earlier total we calculated. So if I go over to Visual Studio, so this is the earlier plugin where we've done a simple bit of business logic to extract three custom fields values, sum them together. There was a requirement for just to prove the process of dividing by 80 and storing that back into a service total field. So now we want to query any associated cases. So what we'll begin by doing is creating a couple of dummy cases. So if we go into CRM, we've got this service totals account, which was the account we were working with. If I just open that, take a few seconds. So that was the original process we were doing, calculate summing these, divided by 80 and putting it into that service total. But now we're looking to take any incidents slash cases against service totals account, total up the discount price and put them into this discount total, subtract that from the service total to give us this final cost. So from the associated cases we can add a new, or we can go to service and cases and add new. So if we just put a couple of dummy cases in, don't know what line of business Sanjeev's in, but if we say someone's phoned in to say their washing machine blew up, don't really need to fill these out, it's only the business required, but the critical one here is the discount price, which we're going to use in the case. So we're going to give them a £10 compensation. That's one. PowerVac 6000 caught fire. Again, it's a problem. They're not happy, and we're going to give them £15 compensation. We'll do one more. The Magimix Turbo Blender. Okay. And say £12, just so we got a fractional part. Okay, so against this service totals account, we've got three cases. We obviously haven't got the discount price on the view. So what we need to do now is go back to our plugin, and we've got two types of query available to us. We've got query expressions. We can also use the LINQ provider. I'll start by showing you how to set up a query expression, which we can just use the service .retrieve multiple method to actually action the query, but begin with you have to set up a condition expression. But before I do that, sorry, I need to add using even Microsoft.xrm.sdk.query. That gives us our access to query expressions, etc. So if I come back down, so we need to set up a condition expression. So we're going to be querying the incident entity that's related. So it's any incidents that are regarding or where the customer is this account. So we need to do a new condition expression. It's an overloaded method for the constructor. So we're going to be using the attribute name that we're looking to query and then putting a condition operator, so it equals to. So the attribute we're looking for on the incident is going to be the customer ID, so we need the customer ID to equal the account that's triggering the plugin. But obviously with condition expressions it's sort of late bound, so we have to use the logical name. So we've just got to do customer ID, which is this is the disadvantage of late bound, where you have to know the exact spelling and what attributes you've got available on a particular entity. And then we should get the condition operator prompted equals, oh sorry, so that's our only condition or criteria we need to set for this query expression. So now we need to define the query expression itself. Query expression. Obviously your naming convention is up to you. I've just put condition expression CE and query expression QE. Equals new query expression. Again, this has got an overloaded method for the constructor. So we put the logical entity name, but because we've got the early bound type, we can use the incident dot entity logical name property, rather than having to know that it was incident all lowercase. And then we need to define there's a few elements. We've done the entity name already by putting it in the overloaded constructor. We need to define the columns we wish to retrieve. So we could be very specific, and this is a string array. I mean, if you want all properties, you just say true. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Oops, sorry, I was doing some poor syntax there. Yes, the column set equals new column set, and within that, the constructor of the column set, if you say true, that retrieves all columns. Or if you want to be specific, obviously for efficiency, you might only want to retrieve, if there's 300 columns on that particular entity, it's very inefficient to retrieve all of them if you only need to utilize 2 or 3. So if we said a new string array and define the fields, so we need our FSO discount price field, and that's really the only thing we need. So that's our column set defined, and that's probably it. Oh, sorry, the criteria. We've obviously defined our condition expression, so we need to add any filter expressions or condition expressions to it. So add condition, and then pass it our filtering condition expression. Then the return type for a query expression is a entity collection, so we need to define that. So we need to say to retrieve our results into, so we can say entity collection results equals service dot retrieve multiple, because it's a query expression, so there's potentially one or more, well, potentially zero, but, and then pass it the query expression. So QEC incident. So that will action that query. It will query the incident entity where the customer ID is equal. Oh, sorry, I've missed off. Sorry, I missed off the actual value. So the customer ID is equal to current account dot ID. Obviously, being a late bound function, it doesn't validate that customer ID is a GUID, so this would only be discovered at runtime if that was incorrect. But the only alternative to query expressions is the LINQ provider, which I'll show you shortly. So we've now got an entity collection of results, and what we can do is do a check of the entity collection. If the count is greater than 0, then we can iterate through them. Before we do that, obviously we're going to be taking a money value, so it's the decimal equivalent of the money value, totaling them all up, and then we'll be writing that into that discount total. So if we define a decimal as discount total, and we initialize that with 0, then we can iterate through each of the entities within that entity collection. So if I say result in results.entities, and then we can check, well, we'll cast each one to a early bound type. So we know we've got cases, so they are incidents in the back end. Incident, that's a restricted keyword, so just use incident equals the entity, which is the initial, the iterator, this res, to entity, cast it to an incident type, and then we can do a check if incident dot FSO discount price is not null. So similar, if we tried to extract the value from it and it was null, we'd get a exception, a null reference exception thrown. So if it's not equal to null, then discount total, that's the shorthand for saying equals discount total plus, it will add on to discount total. So it's the shorthand operand for to sort of add whatever. So value, we can say FSO discount price dot value. So we retrieve all the incidents associated to this customer, retrieve them into an entity collection called results. If the count is greater than 0, we initialize a total value and iterate through each one, adding the discount price to this discount total value type. And once we've iterated through all of them, we can then write that, or we could say if it's greater than or not equal to 0, but we can just write it and we'll store 0 in the value. Obviously, this is only if there's a count of greater than 0. So if we now current account dot where's it gone, discount total, and this is obviously a money field again, so it's expecting a money data type. This discount total is a decimal, so we need to define a new money type and pass in the decimal value. And because we're doing this pre-operation, we don't need to do an update. So again, along with calculating these totals, just afterwards it will retrieve this set of incident results, iterate through and write that into discount total. And then we can do a further check. Actually, no, we'll do it as part of that if the results are greater than 0, because it makes sense. So the final cost will equal the service total dot value minus this discount total value and obviously that will probably be whinging because it's expecting a money type, so we need to surround it all in a new money minus okay, don't know what happened there. So yeah, the final cost will now be calculated from this service total minus the discount total, and again, as I said, because it's pre-operation, that attribute being added to the collection will just get written in by the main database operation. So if I save that, deploy, pop you on pause. Okay, so that's now deployed to CRM. So obviously this isn't ideal the way we've configured it, but just for the purposes of the video and the demonstration, we've made it part of the update and create, and obviously we need to exclude this process, this query expression and process, from a create, because there wouldn't be an ID to be querying on, because until an account exists you can't start associating cases to it. So what I need to do is do a check, because we're running the same plugin logic for both message types. If I say the context.message name equals an update, then our logic can be applied. I'll just redeploy that. So now if we return to CRM, to our service.totals account, obviously we need to trigger the update message in order for it to trigger this piece of code, obviously because we've now excluded creates, because it would give you no meaningful data. It would do nothing because there would be no associated instance on a create. So we have against this account the 3 cases we created earlier with the £10, £15, £12.50 values. So if we now alter that back to say 2000, so we know this should calculate to 100 because it would be 8,000 over 80. It should also retrieve all incidents, which is the 3, total the value to what, the £42.50, and subtract it and give us a final cost. So obviously it's got to load the assemblies again that I've deployed, so there's a bit of a delay. So if I scroll down, oh sorry, £37.50, it's our 100 plus our 100, 10, 15 and 12.5, so yeah, £37.50, which gives us a final cost of £32.50. If I change that back to 1,000, so that should reduce to 87.50, which should be £50 then. You probably notice the speed's much improved because of the plugins are already cached. So then we've got our calculation based on our cases. If I alter one of the cases, obviously in production you'd need the plugin or a piece of plugin logic that was registered on the create or update of a case, so it would update the associated account. But obviously for the purposes of the speed of the video, I haven't done that. So if we put that at £20.50, this won't obviously reflect in the account until we alter one of the values back. So again, put it back to 2,000, so it'd be 100, and we can see the increased discount total and the new final cost. So what I wanted to show you on top of that is that was using a query expression. Using the service context name that we generated in the early bound class, that CRM demo context, it gives us access to the link provider. So if I comment out all of that query expression code, how you define a LINQ query, if you're familiar with LINQ, it's fairly obvious. So you start with a var because it can come back in many types. It can be an iQueryable collection. You could do different methods of the LINQ statement, like a first or default, and get a single record back. So the object that receives the result or results can be a varying type. So it's usual to put a var so that the compiler runtime can handle it. So if we say var incidence equals from cases in, before I do this I need to ensure I've got a using statement for system.link, and also I need to instantiate the organization service context that we defined in the early bound class type. I typically do this inside a using statement so that once it falls out of scope it's immediately disposed of, because if you're tracking thousands of records on a big query or so on, that's a lot of memory usage. So ideally you don't want to wait for the garbage collector. So by putting it inside a using statement, it's disposed of the moment the using elements ended and it falls out of scope. So we've got our CRM demo context, just call it or context equals new CRM demo context. You have to pass the organization service, and then we can start to define our LINQ query. Var incidence equals from cases in org context, and then you have these data sets. So we'll have an incident set where, now this is where we did the condition expression to define the customer ID. Now we'll have because this is all early bound, we'll have a strongly typed, so we can say from where cases dot, we've got the customer ID strongly typed property equals the current account ID. So that's an entity reference. So if we say the ID property of that customer ID equals the current account's GUID, so, and then we can either select all attributes again, like where we defined the column set and we created a new string array and just a single property. By just doing select cases, it would be all properties. If we wanted to only retrieve the same where we had the discount price, we have to say new incident and define the properties within here that we wish. So FSO discount price equals cases dot discount price, and that should be sufficient, and then we'll have a iQueryable collection of incidents where only the discount price is populated. So now if I just reference that, you can see it's this iQueryable collection of incidents, and we can do the same for each case in the cases collection. Oh, that's a restricted keyword, sorry. Just say C. And we can copy, well, we don't need to cast it now because each one of these is an incident, because it's a collection of incident records. So we can say directly, without having to do that step where we cast it, we could use this code, but it won't be incident, it will be C. And let's uncomment that. So I hope that makes sense. So we've got a collection, sorry, it's incidents there, not cases. So we've got a collection of incidents retrieved from this query, and then we're going to iterate through each one, and obviously each one out of the collection as we iterate through it is this case or shorthand C. Obviously that needs to be C as well. And we haven't got this discount total because I haven't defined it. So we'll do that. So we've got the same discount total, initialized it with 0. We've took our incidents results and we're iterating through them, and obviously putting them to this discount total. And then we can do the same final step where we do the calculation after the for each loop, and uncomment that. So we're instantiating our organization service context from our early bound class, doing a LINQ query, which as you can see is strongly typed. It's a lot more, it's less code to write than to have to define condition expressions and query expressions and column sets. So we can, I prefer doing the LINQ queries over query expressions. And then we've declared a initialized decimal for the total, iterate through, set it to the new total, and then do the calculation, and then because it's pre-operation again, let the platform write it as part of the operation. So I'll just deploy. Okay, so that's deployed. So if we go back to our account, now we're going to use the LINQ implementation of the query, so we could delete these values just to show you the process. Obviously, because those values aren't part of the update message, when I save this, no plugin will be triggered to recalculate anything. I need to manipulate one of the 3 service values that we specified in our filtered attributes on the message. So now if I put this back to what we've been messing around with, 1000, this will now trigger our LINQ equivalent of the query. So if I save, we should have about £87.50 plus the total. So same effect, it's done calculate the totals of £45.50, final cost £42, put it back to 2000. Obviously it's quicker because the plugin is now cached. and there you go. So again, same discount total, and obviously the new service total with subtracted is £54.50. Yep, so that completes part 2. Obviously, if you've got any comments, feel free to post them below. Apologies if this was a little bit stuttery in bits. It's been a long day, and I was editing and uploading the previous part 1, so apologies if it was a little bit stuttery in bits. And but any requests, feel free to post them. Thanks for watching.